Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Harley Quinn Season 5, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, we're immediately picking up in the aftermath of last episode. In fact, it's only been like the next day. And so, obviously, Jason has become a Floronic man, and he's like Ivy's having nightmares about the situation. Like, I guess he's subconsciously reaching out to her, but she's just kind of like, okay, Jason's dead, it's all fine. But then Harley is like, no, I know what you did, because she's looking at it and it's like, I wonder, how did she know all that? She found out all the stuff, I guess, like when she found out about the person dying, and she probably looked into it. She found it because she was like, oh yeah, you killed your abusive ex, because I guess she read all the telltale signs to be like, well, this is, I mean, once again, it's like no one else knows that Ivy did it because it's labeled as a freak accident. So the fact is, I guess that's just kind of how, I mean, that showcases, Harley's investigative mind and stuff. But also, let's not forget, she was part of the Bat family for a period of time, so some of that investigative heroism rubbed off on her, I'm sure. But it was just like, yeah, she kind of figured that out on her own because no one else knows that, so she was able to put the clues together to figure that all. Like I said, even knowing that Woodrue was her like abusive ex and stuff like that, and they tried to kill, no, she found out the whole like, oh, he tried to kill you thing, and so he killed you, and now you killed him. It's like, no. He tried to kill me. Now I've successfully killed him. And Harley's trying to get Ivy to talk about it. Understandably, too, because it's like, she's like, you need to, like, process all that. And Ivy's like, no, I don't need to. It's like, I mean, don't forget, your girlfriend is a psychologist. She hasn't been practicing in a while, but Harlan Quinzel is still in there and pops in from time to time. So it's like that knowledge, that psychologist knowledge is still there. So, but it's like, yeah, I mean, once again, I figured Harley would, it's understandable where it's like you want your partner to be open and honest with you when they're going through something. Like, the moment you ran into Woodrue, you should have told me. We could have talked about it. I mean, even, I know in Harley's case, it's like, I could have helped you murder the dude. It didn't come up in the episode, but, Harley's down for Ivy like that. It's like, like, with Thelma and Louise in it, well, hopefully not the same ending as Thelma and Louise, but you get the point I'm trying to make. So, but we're in this together, and it's just, Harley wants Ivy to open up about it, but Ivy's like, no, it's fine, it's whatever, because it's all done. Like, I dealt with the bastard, it's fine. And she's just avoiding the topic because, and once again, it's a tough topic when you're talking about the person who basically made you who you are. I mean, he tried to murder you, so that sucks. He was going to try and take your work and take your credit. I mean, obviously that takes less precedent over him trying to murder you, but then, like, yeah, you became Poison Ivy because of him. So there's a lot of layers to that. I should also talk about this really quickly. I meant to bring this up immediately. I feel like this is, I mean, maybe, and someone can correct me in the comments down below. This episode is so interesting how, like, the A plot is, I mean, yes, there's small bits of jokes here and there, but the A plot is so serious and dire, and then you have, like, cut back to the B plot being so silly. But I mean, I'm sure that has happened. I'm just not thinking of episodes that really resonate, like, because it's like you're dealing with a domestic abusive relationship kind of coming back, where like you're the whole rigmarole of how you killed your ex, but your ex came back with superpowers and is trying to kill you now type of thing, like that age-old story. I mean, that story probably is a little, I mean, in the year of 2025, that story probably has been done probably over the years, like more than I probably am aware of. But either way, so that, and Ivy's trying to deal with that on her own, but it's like, it sucks when like he can get inside your head because he's able to access the green now. So she goes inside the green trying to see like what's going on and gets stuck in there. And I felt that every time we cut back to Ivy's stuff, it just kind of made me feel uncomfortable because I'm like, oh, like her ex is like torturing her. I'm just like, oh, it's just kind of like, it's dark, dude. This fit like, because I made this comparison of like Creature Commandos feeling so much like Harley Quinn meets the Doom Patrol TV show. And now, like, this episode feels like a Creature Commandos episode. I'm sure if you go back and really pay attention, I'm sure there's a lot of other Creature Commando-esque episodes, but it's like, because that really juxtaposition the depressing with just kind of like the action and fun and stuff like that. I mean, but it's just this episode really, especially because that dealt with a heavily toxic relationship between the bride and Frankenstein. So it's just like, oh boy. I mean, but to be fair, like, the show already dealt with a toxic relationship, and Harley knows about toxic relationships because her whole relationship with the Joker. So I didn't even think about, like, right, that's probably even more reason why Harley wanted Ivy to confide in her about it. But it is also that thing of, hey, you got to let people come to you when it's their time that they want to talk about it. It's like you have to meet people where they're at. You know, a 50-50 thing is like you meet them halfway. You got to wait them to kind of make their, because you can't do all the work. You have to let them feel comfortable enough to want to deal with it themselves. But Ivy also obviously didn't want to deal with it. I mean, once again, like, it all happened pretty quickly. She was just kind of taken off guard when she ran into him, and immediately got in her head, I'm going to kill you the same way you tried to kill me. So I also got super nervous the moment Frank got brought into the story, because I was scared. I was like, oh my God, please don't tell me Frank. I was like, don't tell me you're going to bring Frank back just to, like, kill him. I was nervous because I was like, it felt like this was a setup where they could easily kill Frank. And it was just like, oh man, that would suck. I was actually surprised Harley went to Frank, because I immediately was like, she's like, oh, who do I call about this stuff? I was like, well, you know Swamp Thing, but I don't think you know his number. I figured if you were to, you'd probably have to call Nora and get his phone number that way or something like that, because I don't know. Because the last time they got Swamp Thing's information, didn't they get it from Constantine? I'm like, and once again, who knows who has that information? I mean, you know, so I could easily. I don't know. I'm curious. I just thought it was interesting that it was Frank, because my immediate thought was like, oh, it's Swamp Thing, which, once again, perfect considering, well, Swamp Thing, Floronic Man is Swamp Thing's villain, and once again, tying it back into also, like, you kind of had a setup to it, but sadly no conclusion to the setup for it in the Swamp Thing TV show. So, but then Harley has to deal with, like, Floronic Man's body in real life, because it's kind of like, right, in the green he's stronger. I'm sure there's, like, psychological elements to that too, where it's just kind of like, I mean, he's probably perpetually feeding off everything, all the chemicals in that lab, and it's just, but he's also like, Ivy's, like, you know, dealing with, like, the psychological stuff of, like, this is her ex, and he's like, oh, but, like, I'm much stronger than you. It's like, well, is he really that stronger than her, or is it just because, like, her psyche's a little, like, fractured right now, and just because it's like, you know, everything related to, I thought I killed you, but you're back, and it's just like, you're back in my life, everything revolving around you. And so Harley is going off trying to find his body, and I love the different labs she goes by. The guy just being like, okay, and come now, okay, orgasm at 17 and a half minutes. And she's like, oh, sex experiment. She's like, I love whatever this is, love what you guys are doing. Then came across another one. She's like, another sex experiment? And Lily was like, oh no, we're just having sex. And she's like, oh my God, I miss grad school. But yeah, finds Floronic, Jason's body, Jesus, and slices and dices him. So, and it's very much kind of in a very horror movie-esque sequence where it's just, why won't you die? And she's just like cutting him up. I kind of was worried, like, oh, that's not going to be enough, but it seems like it is. I would worry that, like, it might be kind of like, funny enough, you know, there's similar parallels. It's probably very much like the Vecna situation from Stranger Things, where it's like, yeah, your real body is vulnerable while you're stronger, like, doing your, like, magic kills and stuff, quote unquote magic kills. You get what I'm saying? But, like, out in the real world, you're not as strong as Ivy is. You only had the advantage in the green. But I was thinking, like, oh, you'd have to burn his body. But I mean, I was actually surprised too, because I was like, for one, I also didn't expect this storyline to immediately get resolved next episode. I was wondering if this would be a thread that continues throughout. I'm also curious to find out what Lena's perspective is on this. Like, well, that's kind of potentially a moot point where the episode ends, because just when Harley and Ivy had just resolved this situation, also, we found out that Frank has constantly been eating her lipstick. She's like, what the fuck, Frank? That's super expensive. Even that brand that he spits up at you. She's like, they don't even make that anymore. I don't know why that was his, like, why were you eating her lipstick? Was that just to fuck with her or what? But it was kind of poetic for like Ivy and Ivy's story, Pamela's story as Ivy started kind of with Frank and Jason, for them both to be together when it kind of comes to an end was very, I'm sure, cathartic in a lot of ways and poetic in a lot of ways for that situation. But yeah, but they immediately get snatched up by Brainiac, which I'm like, why? I don't know if he always is, but obviously I think about the show Krypton, where he's a collector of people and worlds. So I'm like, is that what he's doing? Like, why did he take such an interest in Ivy and Harley? Like, he's even saying, like, at the end, like, "Ooh, what are we gonna do with them? Like, why are you doing this?" And obviously this also ties into the B plot, because you have I love Lois coming in, because like Perry's like, Lois, there's something fishy going on here and stuff. She's like, yes, I know, because I literally walked into your office and said that to you. You're like, ugh. I love, because most depictions I've seen of Perry is kind of like, yeah, he might be a hard ass, but he's a good boss. And I think in this particular version, they're making him like, oh, he's a hard ass that doesn't listen to anyone. I don't know if it's just Lois he doesn't listen to, or is there other reporters he doesn't listen to. He just kind of stuck in his own way of being like, oh yeah, like not listening to her because she's the one being like, oh, there's something going on here. It's like people have been having dreams of like a skull, which I'm assuming that's Brainiac, but maybe that's something else entirely. So I'm curious to see where that whole situation goes, especially considering Superman's off planet right now. I mean, granted, there's other superheroes, but we also don't know where Bruce is with the whole Batman thing, especially with the Bat family. So we don't know where that goes. But like, yeah, the world's populated with other DC heroes, so I'm curious to see what that means. Has no one taken notice of Brainiac fairly close to the planet? But obviously, circling over to the B plot, it follows Clayface and his, he's doing his one-man show of Pearl Harbor, but it's told from the perspective of someone who wasn't there. I was like, you could tell that story to some degree, but to go as far as he did, where it's like, oh, I'm telling it from the perspective of an Italian shoemaker who died 20 years before Pearl Harbor. And the whole thing of like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen at Pearl Harbor for 20 years from now. Oh, I guess I'll go back to making my shoe. I'm like, who comes up with that fucking premise? That's amazing. And then he waits at the stand for like, oh, I cannot wait for this review. And then he's just like, oh, I guess I'm not on the front page because it's about Jason's murder. And then he goes to the back page and they were talking about the hate crime that was his Italian accent. You're like, Jesus Christ. And there's another thing being like, oh, kind of makes you wish you were never born or something like that. You're like, wow. And there was also that guy, he's like, oh, do you know what this means? That guy was like, oh, that we should have, what was he saying? We should have neutered raccoons before we did cats or something like that. And so I love Clayface just strolls into the Daily Planet, where I'm like, I mean, I guess he's reinvented himself as an actor. I'm like, it is so interesting how like people are able just to casually move around. It's like, we do have big time super villains like Harley and Ivy do. I mean, to be fair, like Harley was doing her superhero thing. It's like, I guess there's just so many rules we get to just skirt by in this world. When you just think about the fact is, we have big time villains, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, just moving to Metropolis. Once again, I guess it's like they're reinventing themselves, and they kind of already have, so they're not as villainous as they were before, and no one's really knows them for being the villains they are. Because I like even the whole season 3 situation where there's kind of like the plant zombie situation going on. I'm like, how much of the world knows that Ivy was responsible for that, or remembered that Ivy was responsible for that? So, I don't know. But yeah, like Clayface is able to just casually stroll up. He's not even in disguise. He's just himself, but he's a big time actor, so he's kind of got recognition and stuff, but a lot of that's kind of fallen off because, well, Clayface is Clayface. And so his idea is to like, right, he wants someone to write up a different, it's like, right, go to the paper itself to have them retract their statements about his performance. And even Perry's like, I didn't see it. People said it was bad. Not as bad as gout, but nearly as bad. So Clayface decided to knock out Perry. At first I was like, are you just straight up replacing Perry? You're like, no, you're kidnapping him so that you can write down, like, you know, your story of Stutz. So who does he bring in? None other than Bane, because apparently Bane did a great job writing up about his hernia surgery. So he's got Bane writing it. And so then Clayface decides to replace Perry. He's not listening to Lois about his story because he's like, oh, who cares about that stuff? We need to talk about this Clayface guy. We need to focus on spotlighting our artists. It's like, whoa, there's only one artist you're spotlighting a lot, because the outro literally has article after about. I wonder if they all from the same newspaper or those different newspaper articles following Clayface. You know, so it's like, oh, is it really an artistic spotlight, or are you just focusing on one particular artist? So I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen with Perry. Like, you know, how long is he going to be removed from the board with this situation? So, yeah. Oh, and also he hired Bane as like the head colonist, and it's just like, yep, he's able to just stroll in and has that job now. He's saying like, oh, him and Lois is going to share desk. I also love that Jimmy got a picture of this, even though he screwed up getting a picture of the thing in the sky because his lens cap was on. It's like, oh, Jimmy. But you sure as hell got a picture of this situation. So it's going to be interesting to see where that storyline takes us. And because obviously that's going to relate to the Brainiac stuff, but it's like, most likely Clayface is going to run the Daily Planet into the ground, and how that's going to coincide with all the, you know, it's like, oh, we're not getting word out, we're not investigating. I mean, I'm sure Lois is going to do her own investigating with Jimmy and stuff like that. I'm curious if Jimmy know about Clark being Superman in his continuity or not. Just, once again, interesting timing and stuff like that, because that ends up being, spoilers, a story beat in Superman, the final season of Superman and Lois, that Jimmy doesn't find out until, spoilers, 20 years like into like years and years later, you know? So I don't know, I'm just thinking it's fascinating. So yeah, I'm curious. Especially when you have something like My Adventures with Superman, where it's like, oh, Jimmy's like, dude, I've known you've had powers for a while now, you know. So it's just funny things. But I'm curious to see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.